It starts with a phone call. A client expected to order 100 tons of steel cancels. The reason? New tariffs in Vietnam and South Korea, specifically targeting steel. This isn't just a minor trade dispute, it's a full-blown tariff storm, and the bitter chill is already settling over China's steel industry. Just a decade ago, Chinese steel was a global commodity in high demand. Now, it's become something nations actively avoid. More than 20 countries across continents Asia, Europe, North and South America are erecting trade barriers, trying desperately to stem the tide of Chinese steel. The result? Chinese steel exports are teetering on the verge of collapse. Let's examine the key players pushing back. Vietnam, once China's largest steel export destination, felt the pressure from its local businesses. Starting in February, implied year based on context, possibly 2024 or 2025, the government imposed a temporary tariff up to 28% on Chinese hot-rolled steel. By April, the tariff on galvanized steel climbed to 37%. The impact was immediate. Chinese steel exports plummeted 28% month-on-month. Major players like Baosteel, Ansteel, and Shougang saw their dominant market share, formerly 64–68% of imports, rapidly erode. By March, Chinese factories making hot-rolled coil saw profits flip from $50 per ton to a loss. Order cancellations flooded in. Bloomberg analysts and industry experts like Vutran, formerly of Cargill, believe these temporary measures are likely precursors to permanent tariffs, potentially allowing Vietnamese plants to finally compete on cost now that alleged Chinese dumping is being curbed. South Korea's response has been even more targeted. In February 2025, its Ministry of Trade imposed temporary anti-dumping taxes up to 38% on Chinese steel plate products, crucial for shipbuilding and construction. The tariffs hit specific companies hard. Baosteel, China's largest exporter, at 28%, Shougang at 30%, and others like Shagang Steel and Rizhao International Trade at 38%. Consequently, China's thick plate exports to South Korea dropped 14%. Just a month later, initiated by South Korean giant Hyundai Steel, an anti-dumping investigation was launched into hot-rolled steel from both China and Japan. Vietnam and South Korea combined represented nearly 20% of China's total steel exports. With both markets now actively blocking imports, at least 6% of China's massive 110 million tons of annual exports has simply vanished. India, the world's second-largest steel producer, is showing no mercy. On April 21st implied year, India's Ministry of Finance announced a 12% safeguard duty on certain imported steel, set to last 200 days. This comes as India became a net importer of finished steel for the second year running, with imports hitting a 9-year high of 9.5 million tons. The influx of Chinese steel forced Indian plants to cut production, even considering layoffs. India's steel minister stated this measure provides crucial breathing space for local producers, especially SME. The European Union acted swiftly. On January 13, 2025, the European Commission imposed temporary anti-dumping duties ranging from a significant 14.1% to a staggering 62.6% on Chinese tinplate and non-alloy steel products. This followed an anti-dumping investigation into Chinese tinplate launched in May 2023, which had already caused an 18% drop in those exports. Between January and May of last year, likely 2024, exports fell another 7.2–5%. On April 1st implied year, the EU further tightened the screws, reducing steel import quotas by 15%, leaving only 10 million tons duty-free. Anything above that faces a 25% tax. Considering the EU imported 60 million tons of steel in 2024, with China supplying 5.6 million tons, this means around 5 million tons of Chinese steel now face that punitive tariff, decimating profit margins. The United States implemented perhaps the most stringent defenses under the Trump administration, not just a 25% tariff, but new melted and poured standards for North American steel, requiring the initial production process to occur within the region. This has driven Chinese steel exports to the U.S. down to virtually zero in some months. Latin America has joined the retaliatory wave. On March 24th implied year, Colombia imposed anti-dumping taxes of 41.7% on Chinese galvanized steel and plain steel plate and an eye-watering 94.64% on galvanized steel tiles, effective for 5 years. Mexico slapped a 50% tariff on steel. Chile targeted steel balls 35.4% and steel rods 24.9%. Brazil hiked its tariff from 10.8% to 25%. The cumulative effect is devastating. Standard & Poor's predicts a sharp 15–20% decline in China's steel exports in 2025 compared to the 2024 peak of 110 million tons. Bloomberg's research is blunt. Roughly 50% of China's steel exports are now obstructed by trade barriers. Data confirms the continuous decline, with April implied year exports falling 10–15% month-on-month, following significant drops in March concentrated in markets like Indonesia, India, Thailand, and Vietnam. Chinese steel traders are trapped. The old trick of quietly relabeling steel as Vietnam-made or Thailand-made to bypass tariffs is no longer viable. Countries have implemented sophisticated, almost DNA-level origin certification systems. Chinese steel effectively has nowhere left to hide. It's encircled. While facing global rejection, China's domestic steel industry was already riddled with problems. The crisis became undeniable in the first half of 2023 when half of listed steel companies reported losses. The China Steel Industry Association revealed the average profit margin enterprises plummeted from 3.8% in 2022 to just 0.9% in 2023. The second half of 2023 saw a dramatic worsening. Ansteel lost 1.16 billion yuan. Banksy Steel lost 1.24 billion yuan. Chongqing Steel lost 980 million yuan. Hong Steel lost 1.3 billion yuan. Manchin Steel lost 890 million yuan. Baotou Steel lost 1.7 billion yuan. Notably, Hesteel Minmetals saw performance drop 578%. Losing 664 million yuan, a historic record, leading to hiring freezes, canceled bonuses, and even cuts to basic maintenance. 2024 marked the full eruption. By January last year, likely 2024, 75 out of 201 steel production companies and 115 blast furnaces had ceased operations. The operating rate for CMNA dipped to 75.5%. By June, construction steel production cuts hit 336 million tons in a single month. An internal Ministry of Industry report in July last year admitted to unprecedented overcapacity. National crude steel capacity reached 1.26 billion tons, dwarfing domestic demand of roughly 850 million tons. That's in excess of over 400 million tons, equivalent to the entire annual output of the world's second to 10th largest steel producers combined. Enough steel to build 300,000 Eiffel Towers or circle the Earth's equator with steel tracks 90 times. The consequences. In August last year, Dongling Group, a leading steel company, declared bankruptcy, leaving 18,000 jobless. By September, panic set in as construction steel prices fell below 3,000 yuan ton, a 6-year low well below the cost line for most mills. In January this year, likely 2025, Jiangsu Delong Nickel Industry, the world's second-largest stainless steel producer, declared bankruptcy. 32 other companies paused production under the guise of maintenance. Closures became frequent from Hebei to Liaoning. This leads to a fundamental question. Why are Chinese steel prices so incredibly low, often sold at a loss? In Con 2024, Chinese hot-rolled coil export prices were 4,8,520 ton compared to 6,5,700 in Europe and 7,5,800 in the U.S., a 30–40% difference. Even India's prices were 15–20% higher. The answer lies in several factors, painting a picture less like a normal industry and more like a state-supported project. Labor costs. Chinese steel workers earn an average of 3,000 yuan a month, compared to the equivalent of 39,000 yuan for U.S. workers or 21,000 yuan for Japanese workers. Labor accounts for only 3.5% of costs in China versus 18% in the U.S., 14.5% in Europe, and 12% in Japan. Externalized environmental costs. Chinese steel firms invest only 2-3% of costs in environmental protection, compared to 7-10% in developed nations. China emits 2.2 tons of CO2 per ton of steel, above the global average 1.9 and far above the EU 1.5. A World Bank report estimated internalizing these costs would raise prices 15-20%. These costs are borne by local residents, e.g. 12 billion yuan in pollution-related health costs annually in Tangshan Hadaqi and the environment. Government subsidies. This is crucial. Subsidies are widespread and often hidden. Below-market land prices, 20-30% discount. Cheaper industrial electricity, 30% lower. Lower effective tax rates, 60% of nominal, and subsidized loans. Estimates suggest the industry received over 320 billion yuan in subsidies in 2023, nearly 11 times its total profit. An anonymous Ministry of Finance expert claimed 70% of Chinese steel firms would go bankrupt within a year without subsidies. Strategic military importance. Steel is fundamental to defense. The military consumes an estimated 80 million tons annually, around 8% of production. The government subsidizes heavily to ensure this strategic supply. Employment and social stability. The industry employs millions. In Hebei province alone, steel and related jobs exceed 6 million, over 16% of the workforce. A large mill provides 10,000, 15,000 direct jobs and 50,000, 80,000 indirect jobs. Local governments subsidize loss-making plants to avoid mass unemployment and potential social unrest. Blocked from primary markets, Chinese exporters turn to secondary ones in the Middle East, Africa, and South America. But this whack-a-mole game is proving difficult as countries like Egypt, Nigeria, and the UAE also raise import standards and demand stricter certifications. Some large state-owned enterprises are accelerating a going-out strategy, building plants overseas. Biosteel's 5 billion yuan project in Malaysia, 3M ton capacity. Hesteel's 2.6 million ton facility in Indonesia, and Ansteel's ongoing steel plant construction in Africa. But will these investments pay off? Can China truly escape its overcapacity bind, or will it be forced to rethink its entire steel industry strategy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on China's economy and global trade. Thank you for watching.